The black-haired young man threw down 8 flags, then he weaved various patterns with his hand as he chanted. Sky, lake, fire, thunder, wind, water, mountain, earth. The characters of these 8 words gradually emerged from the flags. The flags began to slowly rotate. As his chanting continued, the flags rotated faster and faster. His voice grew louder and airier. It sounded as if the voice came from the sky. Purple flame of the 8 trigrams, I command you. He was still chanting. A huge Taijutsu was surfacing underneath his sword. The Taijutsu faced the rotating flags that were confining Zui Kong. Purple flame revolved within the Taijutsu. They were waiting for the chanting to finish, then the flame would descend onto Zui Kong. Right at this critical moment, Zui Kong's eyes grew cold as ice. A 70 centimeters short sword suddenly appeared in his hand. He slashed at the air in front of him. Black hair quickly dodged to the side. Yet, his arm was still cut in two. There were only a few words left to his chanting. Pick up the phone. Pick up the phone. I am his woman. Just then, a sound came from his chest and interrupted his rhythm. Black hair wanted to force those last few words out, but he paused for a few seconds, then vomited a mouthful of blood. His face turned pale white. He took out an antique-looking phone from his pocket. Hello, I get it. Hand the phone to Adam. I am not far from the waterfall of characters, but he makes me rage, understood? He then threw the phone to Zui Kong, who caught it and placed it by his ear. Hello, is this Adam? Look, time no see. Thanks for letting us go the last time. Or I would have lost 2 garbage cleaners. A calm voice responded through the phone. There isn't much to be said. Zhenjia has to die. I think you have met Team Devil. There only needs to be 1 demon like him. 2 would be troublesome even for you. End of discussion here. If you want to play your art of manipulating people, you can kill Luo Yinglong here. He's going to revive in God's dimension anyway, as long as his core remains. However, if I see his core return to the sky and earth mirror in my hand, it signifies a declaration of war. I will use all our resources to kill you, even if we were to let the other 3 team go. That will let the demon escape, but you aren't that much less of a threat from him. Is that so? Zui Kong pondered for a long while before he said with laughter. I can't die yet. I can't die before my little apple ripens. Then let's compromise. You can't attack him before the end of the battle at Gondar. Because his strength supports the life of Team China and my little apple is in that team. This is my bottom line. If you refuse, you can see the beautiful core fly through the sky. He did not hesitate before speaking his words, despite being on the ground while Luo Yinglong was in the air. Luo Yinglong's cheeks turned red. He almost couldn't control himself from attacking. Deal. And there's one more thing I have to verify. I heard that man is also in Team China. If possible, let him know that I am in Team Celestial. Otherwise, this realm will be too unexciting. Team China of course wouldn't know what was happening far away. Zheng and his group followed Aragorn and the other movie characters. The 9 of them rushed their way as they wanted to catch up to the Uruks before they rest. Aya was in risk of getting defiled. That was under the assumption that Team Africa failed to save Aya. They were getting close to the Uruks after a few days of rushed chasing. The dead bodies on the ground never stopped appearing. They had become the marker for their route. After 4 days and nights, another morning came. Everyone including Zheng was feeling their bodies unable to keep up. Aragorn had no choice but to agree to rest for 3 hours. The sun would come up in 3 hours and they could continue the chase again. The sun is in the color of blood. It seems like a massacre happened not that far away last night. Legolas stared at the sun and said. Everyone looked tired. They had been running for 4 days without rest, only stopping to eat and drink. Yet, they still hadn't caught up to the Uruks. The Uruks had extraordinary endurance. Once everyone got up, Legolas handed them each a piece of biscuit. He then went to check the ice statue. That was what he did every day. He led the group on the road again, following the traces on the ground. They arrived at an grassy field stretching as far as the eye could see. Judging by the map, they had entered the Rohan territory, a kingdom of cavalries. Rohan's specialties were horses and elite riders. Their force was only second to Gondar among the kingdoms of man. By noon, everyone was tired. A series of whinnies suddenly came from the distance. Their hearts skipped a beat because clops of numerous horses running followed after the whinny. The group hid behind large boulders to be safe. They saw a group of cavalry charging by. The cavalries were elites. The horses were smaller than the nightmare but were obviously fine breeds. The size, defense, and speed of a horse determined the strength of a cavalry's charge. You can see they are well trained. They maintained a defensive formation while running. Xian answered when Zheng asked about the strength of the knights. Zheng nodded. The last question is, can they use battle chi? If they do, this army would be overpowered. They cavalries had ran past them. There were about 500 of them. Some of the knights also were leading extra horses. Aragorn came out of hiding and yelled. Riders of Rohan. What news from the mark? You look like you just fought a battle. When the leader in front stopped, the rest of the knights ran around to his back as if someone were commanding them. They continued to maintain their formation. The leader of the cavalries looked at Aragorn, then led his knights over. Gimli, Legolas, and the players also came out. The knights encircled the 9 of them in the center. They pointed their spears at the group. 9 people seemed so insignificant among several hundred cavalries. The leader entered the circle. He questioned the group in a cold voice. What business does an elf, a man, a dwarf, a woman, and a girl have in the Rittermark? What do you plan to do with such a strange group? Gimli couldn't hold himself back. Give me your name, horse master, and I shall give you mine. The leader got off his horse and walked over to Gimli. Their heights were such a contrast. He said in a cold tone. I would cut off your head, dwarf, if it stood but a little higher from the ground. Cut off your head? Right as the leader finished his sentence, Zheng's sword was already on his neck. Zheng repeated the question with the same cold tone. The riders were startled. Not one of the hundreds of them caught Zheng's movement. His speed was simply too fast, and secondly, everyone's eyes were looking at Gimli until the moment the red sword was placed next to their leader's neck. No one dared to move at this moment. Aragorn and Legolas were also appalled. It wouldn't be as serious a problem if it were someone else holding the sword. They knew how strong Zheng was, someone who took down hundreds of Uruks. The riders were well trained, but their numbers here weren't enough for him to kill. Aragorn immediately stepped in front of Zheng. This is a misunderstanding, riders of Rohan. I am Aragorn, son of Eredurn. This is Gimli, son of Glin, and Legolas, from the Woodland Realm. These are friends of Gandalf the Grey and brave warriors of Man. We are friends of Rohan and of Vidin, your king. There is no need to point your spears at us. The leader didn't panic. He waited for Zheng to move the sword away, then said. Vidin no longer recognizes friend from foe. Not even his own kin. Saruman the White has gained control of him. The leader removed his helm, revealing a tired face. The riders withdrew their spears. The leader continued. Saruman has poisoned the mind of the king and claimed lordship over this land. My company are those loyal to Rohan. And for that, we are banished. The white wizard is cunning. He walks here and there, they say, as an old man, hooded and cloaked. And everywhere his spies slip past our nets. Aragorn let out a sigh of relief. He reapplied the riders mistook them for spies, hence the hostility. He said. We are no spies. We track a band of Uruk-hai westward across the plains. They have taken 2 of our friends captive. The leader pondered. We encountered the Uruk-hai during the night. To our surprise, it looked as though a terrifying thing was chasing after them. They continued running after seeing us. We did notice a woman and a hobbit among them. Zheng said. That's the right group then. The woman and hobbit are our comrades. Did you see any other humans? The leader shook his head. No other man. We did not find any woman or hobbit after the battle. They might have ran or they might have died to our horses. We piled the carcasses and burned them. He pointed to smoke in the distance, about a few kilometers away on a low ground. Aragorn met eyes with the players. No one said a word. The movie characters were worried, but Team China knew Team Africa had entered the woods according to the plot. The leader looked over the 9 of them, then said something to his adjutant. Several riders then brought over 7 horses. May these horses bear you to better fortune than the former masters. Look for your friends, but do not trust the hope. It has forsaken these lands. He put his helm back on, then mounted on his horse. He headed through the riders. The riders departed as fast as they had came. A few minutes later and they were far away, leaving the group of 9 and 7 horses in the field. Oh, and there was the skeleton horse carrying a frozen statue. Zheng and Aragorn nodded to each other. They each mounted on a horse. Lan and Yinkong mounted on one. Gimli and Legolas mounted one. Then the group rode toward the burning carcasses. They arrived at the smoking area before long. Several spears stood on the ground, each had a head of Uruk at its end. In the center of the area was a 2-meter-tall pile of dead bodies. The number of Uruks was approximately 100. There was no hope of finding any survivor among these bodies. They had to search the weapons and items for traces. Some time passed. Gimli pulled a charred belt from the weapon pile. He cried. It's one of their little belts. They may have been. No. Aragorn did not look at the belt. He looked to the side and some tracks. A hobbit lay here. He crawled. And a woman crawled over here. Look here, traces of shoes that belonged to man. While Aragorn was searching for the traces, Team China examined the wounds on the Uruks since they knew the captives were fine. Zheng looked at a cut-off head and said. Cut by a dull anti-cavalry saber. The charging speed from a horse gives it enough destructive force without a sharp blade. Yet, the head doesn't look surprised. So it wasn't killed by the riders charging at the band. This wound has trace of battle chi. He turned around to face the other 5 members. I saw Aragorn use his battle chi. The battle chi transfers to his sword and increases its toughness. It can even block my light blade. Which means after the riders first charged at the Uruks, they continued to fight them in an arm-to-arm battle. It had to be battle chi that allowed him to cut such a clean wound using a dull saber without the speed from a charge. Why are you looking at me like that? Aside from Xian, everyone else seemed stunned. It was as though he was saying bizarre things. Well, Chang Xiao said in a serious tone. It would be normal if Aragorn was the one saying these things. But bro, aren't you role-playing too seriously? Do you really believe you are an experienced mercenary in this world? You were an office worker. Zheng scratched his head. We have been fighting with our lives every day aside from the days in God's dimension. I can't not learn these things even if I try to. The consequence from using Tiger's Soul taught me how to control my strength when using a blade and how slashes function. Battle chi is also similar to chi, so I seem to have become an expert without realizing it. Haha. Xian ignored his laughter. He continued examining the burned bodies and intact heads. Around 70 to 80% of the riders can use battle chi. The rest might be new recruits. They have excellent capacities. And with battle chi, these riders can rival Uruk's 2 to 3 times their number. Right, I also thought about it. If we have 1,000 riders and 50 elves that can use explosive shot, we won't have to fear the other two teams. Though these elven archers are rare. They also won't participate in the war. The other thing is the nemesis. Zheng laughed. Xian continued after him. Get it? The nemesis can retain most of the person's prior abilities and unlock the first to second stage. It also enhances a person's body to 10-folds his stats. If we can transform the Uruk leaders that can use explosive shot to nemesis, 20 of them would be enough to deter the other two teams. Is this what you were going to say? Zheng nodded. Right, right. No matter how strong they are individually, as a team, or with their influence, 1,000 of these riders and 20 of those nemesis give us the power to go wherever we want. There's no need to worry about Team East America or Team Celestial. Oh. Xian sneered. What about the final ring wraith? Are you certain the explosive shot can hit it? What if Sauron is more powerful than the Balrog? Can you kill it with this group? And what if there's someone as strong as your clone in Team Celestial or Team East America? You are too optimistic. I don't know what kind of feeling this is, but I feel that I might die in this battle. Zheng couldn't figure out the meaning behind Xian's words. The man was always so calm and confident, like not one thing in this world could scare him. Having him as a comrade made them feel safe. Xian never said anything these kind of words in all the desperate situations they had come through. Zheng didn't know if he should be happy for him or worry. Logically, this would mean Xian had feelings, but he just didn't know how to express them yet. However, the content of his words were worrying. Xian's death hope. This is only his illusion. A person who has been dealing with only data and probability mentions feeling is a bad omen by itself. But his death, I have never thought about this happening. Aragorn traced the footsteps ahead. Zheng was distressed from Xian's words. He had no choice but to simulate Honglu's thinking and try to figure out what Xian meant. Theoretically, he is the safest person among us. He is as safe as Lan. I have been paying attention to protect them. They are the cores of the team. Team China's strength and survivability would drop by a half without them. So if Xian ended up dying, not many in the team can escape death either. It might even end in a wipe. He was indulged in his thoughts that he didn't notice Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli's expressions turning serious. Aragorn noticed Zheng spacing out and shouted at him in a low voice. Be careful. Don't let other things distract you. The trees told Legolas something. Legolas frowned and said. Yes. They are saying the White Wizard is approaching. Saruman has come. The movie characters tensed up. They knew that only wizards could rival wizards. The thundering magic Saruman used was still vivid in their memory. Though Team China knew the one supposed to be coming was Gandalf. So many things happened on the way, but the plot converged to the movie. Gandalf was reborn as Gandalf the White and would meet the group here. As expected, a white light radiated from deep within the woods. Aragorn looked to Zheng. You are the strongest person here. Once Saruman begins his attack, you are the only one who can fight back or perhaps kill him. So do not let him speak, he will put a spell on us. Or none of us will survive. Zheng nodded without much emotion. The white light loomed in on them. The movie characters drew their weapons. Legolas placed 3 arrows on his bow. The players didn't want to bother getting their weapons out, but that would make them appear they were abandoning their comrades. They couldn't help it and grabbed their weapons. They quietly waited for the white light to approach. The white light came very close. Gimli shouted and threw his axe at the light. Legolas also released his 3 arrows. Aragorn and Zheng charged ahead, ready to attack. Though Zheng was merely giving an act. Dong. Dong. The axe and an explosive shot hit a translucent barrier. The barrier was so tough that the axe shattered on impact and arrow couldn't pierce through. Aragorn and Zheng's swords were deflected and only left a crisp sound. You are tracking the footsteps of a young hobbits and a group of humans. They passed this way, the day before yesterday. They met someone they did not expect. Does that comfort you? An old man's voice came from the light. The voice sounded so familiar that Aragorn became suspicious. Who are you? Show yourself. The bright white light cloaked the old man. Following Aragorn's shout, the light dimmed, revealing Gandalf dressed in white. He smiled at the fellowship. The movie characters were stunned. Though the players kept their cool. Gandalf said. Down in the abyss, I fought the core of the Balrog of Morgoth. I attempted to seal the creature with the flame of Yudun. The creature realized its fate was determined. It self-destructed its life core. The flame consumed me. I strayed out of thought and time. Stars wheeled overhead, and every day was as long as the life age of the earth. But it was not the end. I felt light in me again. I've been sent back until my task is done. The movie characters let out a sigh of relief. Aragorn walked over to Gandalf. Gandalf. So glad you're back. Gandalf. Oh yes. That's what they used to call me. Gandalf the Grey. That was my name. I am Gandalf the White. Gandalf turned to the players. I saw your origin through Eris' eyes. You aren't people of our world, but I trust you will help me complete my task. Brave warriors. The players were surprised. Zheng asked. You saw our origin? Is it the world we come from? What is your task? It is of course to destroy Sauron. Gandalf laughed. Xian suddenly asked. Only Sauron? Not the One Ring? Gandalf returned with an enigmatic smile. Era sees through everything. The One Ring will disappear from Middle-earth, but it will not be destroyed. The prophecy says either you or another group of people in Mordor will take the ring away. Sauron will disappear and the ring remains. The 3 elven rings will retain their powers. The elves can stay in their realm and not leave their homeland. This is part of the prophecy I witnessed. The other part of the prophecy shows another group that came from the same place as you. They have strong hostility towards you. Era told me to defeat them, or one person in the group will help Sauron obtain the One Ring. Once the ring falls in Sauron's hands, countless warriors will lose their lives. My task will fail. Gandalf walked along the forest. There is no need to think too far ahead. War has come to Rohan. We must ride to Edoras with all speed. Saruman's army is preparing to attack. Our first battle is to defeat his army. The prophecy says the One Ring will remain safe until we defeat the armies of Mordor. There is no need to worry about it. We need to hurry to Edoras. Zheng asked Xian in a low voice. Can we trust him? Is there really a prophecy that can tell our future? Xian replied calmly. There are gods in this movie world. We can imagine these gods possess strong magical powers. At least the ability to see through nearly all the land and people in this world. When you have nearly perfect information, it isn't difficult to induce the future. Would you actually think my plans are prophecies? Zheng stopped for a moment. Well, your plans sometimes do feel like prophecies. It's like you know what is going to happen next. Xian nodded. Right. I don't see how things develop, but I can induce based on given information and each person's personality. Just like how I am certain how Xian will find a loophole in my plan and try to complete it, and how the other 4 members will end up following his plan. Once you analyze every detail, then the ending naturally comes. Similarly, if this god witnessed the power of Team East America and Team Celestial and saw the hostility they showed toward us, it will come to the conclusion that Gandalf saw. Someone from Team East America or Team Celestial must have come to us before. It is likely that the person attacked us. We should be prepared for their attacks. As the group followed Gandalf through the woods, Gandalf said. The last time Sauron invaded Middle-earth, the half-orcs, and Uruk-hai burned down this land. The Ents were forced to participate in the war. They have bodies over 10 meters tall. Hundreds of Ents buried 10,000 orcs under the land. They took root here to put life back to these woods. Aragorn said. If we can get their help. It isn't possible. Gandalf shook his head. The Ents favor serenity. They can stay in the earth for 10 years at a time. They can converse for days at a time. As long as no one enrages them, they won't leave the woods. They have strong power, but they remained unknown in Middle-earth. The group came to the border of the woods. Gandalf whistled piercingly. It was a magic that spread his sound outward. The rest of the group stopped next to Gandalf. Xian brought out several fruits, then he stared at Gandalf's staff as he ate. The staff was changed to a one made of white jade. Symbols and strange pictures filled its exterior. Xian Zheng leaned against a tree and asked. He was holding the rope of the horse the Rohan riders gave them. The nightmare walked by him on its own. Xian responded but didn't turn his head. Zheng continued. Why are you always eating these things? I don't see you eat that much when we eat together. But you always have fruits or something colorful in hand. Xian, still not turning his head, said. Thinking consumes more energy than exercise. Having something to eat maintains the brain's ability at a flexible state. Neos is a representation of this, except he's too extreme. If you have the time to think about these unimportant questions, I would like to ask you a question. Zheng became curious. Oh, you can always ask me. Not like I will hide anything from you. Good. Are you restraining your own power? He finally turned around to glance at Zheng, then immediately went back to Gandalf's staff. I induced it from things Yinkong said. When we went to Resident Evil for the prototype T-virus, she said you killed several hundreds of evolved lickers. The Heart of Slayer is good, but it isn't the key point. Hundreds of evolved lickers aren't that easy to take down. Yinkong said she can only kill one when fighting face to face. So I could induce your strength. It wasn't possible for you to suffer so little injuries after killing all those evolved lickers with explosion and destruction. I came to the conclusion that something must have happened at the time. Something that Yinkong didn't see. What is it? I am curious what technique or power you are not telling us. It doesn't suit your personality. Afterward in this world, your performance against the ring rates and in the mines of Moria was mediocre. It's close to your strength previously shown. You may not believe it, but you have more potential than Hung. After Resident Evil and even Starship Troopers you were still pretty much the same. Why? There's only one explanation, you are intentionally controlling how strong you appear. Xian finished the last fruit on hand and turned around to Zheng. What are you afraid of? Or perhaps what is that power you are afraid of? I can't give you suggestions on this. You can only rely on yourself to figure it out. However, I want you to know that there's a limit to how much strategies can accomplish. The limit lies on the difference in strength. When this strength exceeds the amount the strategy tolerates, the strategy becomes a joke. If Team Africa can destroy a starship with one punch back in Starship Troopers, not amount of strategy we have would save us. Zheng appeared to be hesitating. He tried to speak but held himself back. After struggling, he said in a low voice. Give me some time. Believe me, I won't harm my comrades. Xian didn't continue the topic. He waved his hand and went back to Gandalf's staff. A bright neigh answered from afar. The 7 horses around him looked uneasy. That is one of the Miras, unless my eyes are cheated by some spell. Legolas could see a white horse running over from the distance. Its speed was on par with the nightmare. When the white clothes came close, they realized it was huge. It was larger than regular war horses by a quarter, the same size as the nightmare. The white horse was intelligent. It stopped in front of Gandalf and rubbed him with its head. Gandalf stroked the white hair. Shadowfax. He's the lord of all horses, and has been my friend through many dangers. Let us ride to Edoras. The group began their journey again to Rohan. The movie characters appeared much happier now. Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli had been bearing the pain of the death of a friend and the pain of being defeated. The return of Gandalf gave them a glimpse of hope, especially since Gandalf gained stronger power. It gave them confidence. The players were stark in contrast. Xian remained indifferent to everything. Lan was still occasionally glancing at Zheng. Changxia was always optimistic as if there were nothing that would trouble him. He kept attempting to talk with Lan and Yinkong and laughing all the time. Hung was working harder than ever since he came to this realm. He kept asking Legolas for the tips on the 3-arrow explosive shot and practiced by shooting at rocks in the distance. He had the highest fighting spirit out of the team. Yinkong and Hung both seemed troubled. They didn't pay any attention to what the others are talking about. And so, this group of 4 movie characters and 6 players rode for several days through the plain and reached Edoras. It was a basic city built on a hill. They could induce through the movie characters conversations that the people of Rohan used to lead nomadic lives. After they settled down, they retained the habits of a nomad. This was a nation with strong military power built on the back of horses. However, they were inferior to Gondor on construction and things concerning normal living. The group approached the exterior of the city, then followed the wooden walls to the gate. Gandalf and Aragorn gave their names, then the small gate opened up. It was only big enough to fit 2 horses at the same time. The group rode into the city. That frozen statue on a nightmare immediately received looks and cries from the civilians. The city though had a low population. The population density seemed scattered when compared to the Shire or the 2 elven cities they passed by. Gimli couldn't hold his mouth. You'll find more cheer in a graveyard. The rest of the movie characters sighed. They climbed the stairs to the hall. After notifying the guards of their arrival, a slightly chubby guard in position came out. I cannot allow you before the Den King so armed, Gandalf Greyhame. By order of Wormtongue. Gandalf changed to a grey robe after they came out the woods. He looked like the grey wizard that he was before. With a nod from Gandalf, the rest of the group gave their weapons to the guards. The players handed their elven weapons over. But when the guard asked for the staff, Gandalf responded. Oh. No, you would not part an old man from his walking stick? He thought for a moment. Another guard pulled his sleeve a bit, then he gave Gandalf a knowing look. He walked back into the hall. The group followed. Not much was needed to describe how Gandalf saved Theoden. It followed the movie plot where he used the power of a wizard to expel Saruman's control. The process was merely Gandalf waving his staff. The king of Rohan looked like an 80-year-old man. After Gandalf saved him from the curse, his body quickly recovered in a minute. His pale grey face slowly gained hint of blood. And he returned to the look of a middle-aged man. Theoden was a strong cavalry. In less than 3 days, he regained the ability to use battle chi and ride a horse. The intensity of his battle chi surpassed that of Aragorn's. He was still valiant despite being past the golden age of a man. No one could ignore his presence. The Fellowship and Team China spent these several days resting. Theoden fell under control for so long that the political system and army of Rohan were now in a chaotic state. He used the time to recover his body and straighten out the political system. Gandalf felt pressed for time, but he didn't put much pressure on Theoden and helped him instead. Team China didn't only rest during these days. They obtained permission from Theoden and began gathering the civilians in the city. Changxia tested blood type of the civilians. He then chose the 30 strongest men, drew enough blood, and finally proceeded the surgery on Boromir. Zheng defrosted with his chi. Yinkong acted as his assistant. This was a surgery covering the heart and lung under crude conditions. 10 hours later, Changxia announced success with an exhausted look. Boromir though had to recuperate for the next several months. In other words, he wouldn't be of use in this war. The other thing was that Gandalf had agreed to unbind the weapons they had. He decided to do it while they had the free time, and the weapons would prove useful in the upcoming battles. The magic to unbind weapons were rather complicated. It needed large quantity of energy stones and he would be weakened for a few days. That was why he chose to do it now. Team China originally planned to watch the magic, but Gandalf drove them out of the room. He chanted in a strange language accompanied by explosions of lights. They realized this process was much more complicated than expelling the curse on Theoden. The lights lasted for an hour before fading away. Gandalf came out of the room exhausted. He handed the weapons to Zheng, returned to his room, and shut the door. He told them not to bother him. He seemed really tired. Gimli said in a low voice after he saw Gandalf shutting the door. Aragorn and Legolas nodded in agreement. They turned to the 2 weapons on Zheng's hand. The invisible sword revealed itself. It looked planed. There was nothing really distinctive about it. Just a plain two-handed sword, except for 2 lines of engravings on the blade. The silver bow on the other hand looked fascinating. Symbols and characters exposed themselves on the bow, covering every bit of its body. Strings of silver light flowed among the symbols and characters. Zheng could not feel these light when he held the bow. The bow was attractive when unbound. Without delay, he handed the weapons to Yinkong and Hung. They dripped their blood on the bow. Excalibur turned invisible once more. The symbols and characters on the bow subsided. Zheng let out a sigh of relief. These soul-bound weapons come with their own abilities. You have to learn to use them during these days. Or it will be too late when the battle comes. Hung naturally agreed. Yinkong glanced at Zheng without a word, then she left with the sword. She was heading to the gate of the city. It looked like she was going to train outside the city. Hung sighed with mixed feelings. Can't believe she's girl. She always trains so hard like she doesn't know what tiredness feels like. People from the Assassin's clan are intrinsically different from us. Zheng stared at her back then sighed. No. Assassin's clan isn't enough for that, she's carrying too much. These burdens are pressing down on her. She has to struggle with all she has to survive. It still comes down to power. We don't have the power to seize our fate. Yinkong's back seemed so lonely. They almost couldn't help but want to share that burden with her. Just so she wouldn't feel lonely. Several days later, the political system of Rohan came under control. Theoden called for the movie characters and the players. He told them his thoughts as soon as they met. Saruman's army is looming. The scouts returned message that he sent an army of 10,000 Uruk-hai. These weren't cowardice like the half-orcs and orcs. The Uruk-hai will reach us in a few days. We don't have the force to rival this army. I plan to migrate my people and army to Helm's Deep. The natural defense of the location will help us defend against the Uruk-hai. Gandalf shook his head. This is but a taste of the terror that Saruman will unleash. He plans to break through Rohan and meet up with the army of orcs from Mordor. The several hundred riders you have will not hold against the 10,000 Uruk-hai even in Helm's Deep. Ride out and meet him head on. You must fight. Aragorn said. You have 2,000 good men riding north as we speak. They were merely forced out of Rohan. Omer is loyal to you. His men will return and fight for their king. Theoden sighed. They are at least 1,500 kilometers from here. We cannot get in contact with them. We cannot garrison here and wait for them. The Uruk-hai will slaughter all my people before they will be back. Loyalty is not the issue. I have decided to make for the refuge of Helm's Deep. Gandalf and Aragorn sighed. They knew nothing more could be said. Xian said. Do you have 100 elite riders? I am referring to ones that possess battle chi, the most elite of the Rohan riders. These riders also need to be proficient archers. Everyone was surprised. Theoden thought for a moment before giving an answer. These should be 100 of elite riders aside from the royal guards. However, they can't fight 10,000 Uruk-hai. Our numbers differ by too many. Xian shook his head. There is no need to fight, just delay them. You will move slow with the civilians. They will drag out a long line. When that happens, a small group of Uruk-hai can harass you. Instead, we can send out our army to harass their march. The goals of the 100 elite riders are to slow down their march, kill their scouts, burn their supplies, ambush their backline and their camps. They will arrive at Helm's Deep exhausted. The movie characters' eyes glimmered. Harassing with small groups existed in this world, but no one treated it as a serious tactic. Guerrilla warfare was foreign to them. Theoden stood up. He walked back and forth, pondering on the possibility of splitting forces. He clenched his teeth then said. We will do just that. Losing 100 elite riders weakens our defense in Helm's Deep, but they are worth if we can get my people into Helm's Deep in safety. I have bring my remaining marshals along. Aragorn and Jen, I need your help. Lead these 100 riders and shield our retreat. Delay the Uruk-hai until all the people enter Helm's Deep. Then come to Helm's Deep as soon as possible. Go. Lead the brave warriors of Rohan to battle. Xian's guerrilla warfare tactic was to have 100 elite riders each carry 2 horses and 3 days' worth of ration. They took off their armors and only had their bow and large number of arrows as weapon. Everyone headed to the battlefield with light packs. Aragorn questioned. Will this actually work? The riders lose over half their strength without armors and spears. I don't think these riders are elite anymore if they encounter the Uruk-hai. I don't agree with your tactic. Zheng laughed. I get his plan. You might think this is stupid, but this type of tactic is terrorizing for the enemies. An ethnic group nearly conquered the world using this tactic back in my world. I can't be certain of the strength of this tactic in this world, but it won't be far off. The movie characters did not understand, but the players connected it with the rise of Mongolia. People familiar with history knew the destructive power this tactic brought, and so they didn't question it. The riders prepared themselves in half a day. Gandalf went after the 2,000 riders that left. Gimli, Changxiao, and Yinkong accompanied Theoden to Helm's Deep. Zheng, Xian, Lan, Hung, Aragorn, and Legolas headed out with the elite riders to delay the Uruk-hai's march. Everyone was prepared to battle. Xian planned to set out at night. They had one last hour of rest. Aragorn somehow got along with the Princess of Rohan. She was a blonde, soldierly woman. She carried a sword and was preparing to protect the villagers to Helm's Deep. As she spoke with Aragorn, she blushed mildly. Legolas and Gimli couldn't stop their smiles watching on the side. Team China was also holding a conversation. Zheng had Cheng Xiao protect Yin Kong to his best, even though Yin Kong was the stronger of the two. Nevertheless, Cheng Xiao took it seriously. Protect yourselves. Some of the Uruk-hai could use explosive shots, so don't show yourselves and fight face to face. Shield yourselves with the city wall. If the plot changed enough that you are forced to retreat, don't drill on getting a victory. Your lives are the most important. Cheng Xiao laughed. I know. You are not that old yet, why are you suddenly speaking like that? Don't worry. We won't trade our lives for points. You're not wrong, but Zheng was going to say something. Then Xian interrupted him from the distance with a yell. Time's up. Everyone depart. Zheng looked at the two of them and said. Just, be careful. He mounted on the nightmare then followed after Xian. This group had abandoned everything that made them heavy cavalries, the heavy armors, the barding, and the spears. The only close-range weapon they carried was a broadsword. This group can only be categorized as light cavalries. In return, they gained swift movement speed. The riders entered the darkness of the night like wind. People in the city could no longer see them. Lan's abilities shined in this situation. She was inexperienced in riding horses. However, the psyche scan was the most useful ability in this tactic. As dawn of the second day came, the group ran through distance that would have taken them 2 days. The psyche scan detected the frontmost group of Uruk-hai. It was a group of 300 Uruk-hai riding on wargs. These were probably the scouts in the movie. Use night arrows, Xian commanded. Xian taught them basic commands after the group was formed. He also had people painted some of the arrows black. Due to the lack of time, each rider only received 10 of such arrows. The riders came near the camps. The horses were trained so that they wouldn't make any noise. Legolas and Hung fired their arrows. The riders then lobbed arrows at the camps. The structure of the Uruk-hai army was very crude. There were no such positions as lieutenants, marshals. The groups tended to be led by a single leader. But due to their strength, the lack of a structure wasn't prominent. The first wave of arrows killed dozens of Uruk-hai. Xian then commanded a wave of fire arrows. It ignited the camps and killed 30 more Uruk-hai. On the third wave, the riders used night arrows again while the Uruk-hai was paying attention for more fire arrows, which led to even more casualties. The Uruk-hai was in a chaos. Only 10 of them mounted on the wards and ran out from the camps. However, what awaited them outside were the riders with their bows ready. Numerous arrows pierced through these 10 Uruk-hai. Xian commanded the riders to lower their bows, then had Zheng lead 30 riders charge into the camps. The rest of the riders began retrieving usable arrows. And so, they wiped the group of Uruk-hai without any casualty. Although ambush was also a factor to the result. It was almost miraculous compared to the riders' previous tactic of charging straight in. Get on your mount. March at normal speed. 20 minutes of eating. 2 hours of rest on the horses. Lan, expand the psyche scan its largest size. Rest when you are tired. Xian commanded, then mounted on his horse. The riders quickly followed his commands. They talked and laughed loudly while they ate. The riders wouldn't fear the Uruk-hai, but the feat they accomplished would normally require 500 elite riders, and not without casualties. This achievement gave them faith in this journey. 3 afternoon on the same day, Lan detected another group of 1,500 Uruk-hai. This group were carrying loads of spoils. It appeared that they raided a village. Xian inquired the situation, then commanded the riders to ambush the Uruk-hai. Zheng was nowhere near Xian's ability when it came to commanding a group of more than 30 people. He was only experienced with small groups. So Xian naturally became the leader here. Zheng worked under his commands. The riders caught up to the Uruk-hai right as dusk fell. Sunlight was dimming, but their views were still clear. The Uruk-hai were unrest upon seeing the riders, but when they realized the small number, they became careless. 300 Uruk-hai raised their spears. And 2 groups split up to surround the riders. The riders didn't charge at them as usual. They shot arrows at the split-up groups. 3 waves of shooting later, 100 of the armored and shield Uruk-hai fell. This enraged the rest of them. 500 Uruk-hai charged at the riders. The riders stopped shooting and retreated. However, they stopped at 50 meters and shot another wave of arrows. They continued to retreat, then shoot. Hundreds of Uruk-hai fell down before they became aware of the situation. Their archers countered, taking down several riders that didn't dodge in time. Xian brought Hung and Legolas for times like this. The 2 of them had greater range and accuracy than the Uruk-hai. They sniped the archers. Any Uruk-hai that came close were shot down by the riders. Yet, they couldn't outrun the horses when they retreated. The Uruk-hai scattered and the riders shot freely. The time reached 2 after midnight. The last Uruk-hai died at the cost of 4 riders. Get on your mount. March at normal speed. 20 minutes of eating. 6 hours of sleep on the horses. Then we will continue the attacks.